I just don't have room for it anymore, Michael said quietly, his eyes fixed on the photo of his daughter on his desk rather than meeting Elizabeth's gaze. The office had emptied an hour ago, leaving just the two of them in the glow of his desk lamp. When Emma asks why I don't bring anyone home like her friend's parents do, I tell her someone already has my whole heart. And that someone is her. If that moment touched your heart, stay with me through this story that will remind you why some sacrifices are made with both pain and purpose. Like and subscribe to support more stories that delve into the complicated beauty of parenthood and sacrifice. Elizabeth hadn't meant to pry. As the regional manager of Westlake Financial, she prided herself on maintaining professional boundaries. But after 3 years of watching Michael Turner decline every company social event, refuse setups from well-meaning colleagues, and rush out precisely at 5 to pick up his daughter, curiosity had gotten the better of her. The quarterly performance reviews were scheduled back-to-back all week, and Michael's slot fell at 4:30 p.m. on a Wednesday. Normally, these meetings were efficient, by-the-book discussions of targets met and goals for the upcoming quarter. Michael was one of her best financial analysts, meticulous, reliable, and remarkably insightful when it came to market trends. His clients adored him for his straightforward approach and transparent communication style. Elizabeth had been prepared for their usual professional exchange. What she hadn't anticipated was the gentle knock on her door at 4:15. "Elizabeth?" Michael stood in the doorway, his tall frame slightly hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. "I know I'm early, but I was wondering if we could start now. Emma's science club ends at 5:15 today instead of the usual 5:30, and I—" "Of course," Elizabeth replied, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. She'd learned to expect these requests from Michael. Always polite, always apologetic, but always putting his daughter first. The meeting progressed as expected. Michael's performance was exemplary as usual. His client retention rate was the highest in the department, and he'd brought in 3 new major accounts in the last quarter alone. "I'm particularly impressed with how you handled the Sorensen account," Elizabeth noted, referring to an elderly client who had initially been hesitant to trust a financial institution with her late husband's estate. "Mrs. Sorensen called me personally to commend your patience." Michael smiled modestly. "She reminds me of my grandmother. Sometimes people just need someone to listen more than they need financial advice. Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. You're on track for the annual bonus, and if you maintain this trajectory, I'd like to discuss a potential promotion in the fall." Elizabeth closed her portfolio and removed her reading glasses. "Thank you," Michael said, gathering his materials. "That's very kind." Something in his tone, the resignation beneath the gratitude, made Elizabeth pause. Here was a man clearly excelling in his professional life, with prospects for advancement, yet there was a palpable loneliness about him that she'd noticed increasingly over the years. Perhaps it was because she'd just gone through her own divorce, or maybe it was the 3 glasses of wine she'd had at lunch with a client, but Elizabeth found herself venturing into territory she normally avoided with employees. "You're young, successful, and, forgive my directness, not hard on the eyes," she had said after all the professional matters had been addressed. "I've seen how Sarah from marketing looks at you. Why won't you date?" The question hung between them like an uninvited guest. Michael's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the leather portfolio in his lap. For a moment, Elizabeth thought he might simply decline to answer. He had every right to, after all. But instead, he seemed to make a decision, setting the portfolio aside and meeting her gaze directly for perhaps the first time in their professional relationship. "My daily routine doesn't leave much room for dating," he began, his voice matter-of-fact but not defensive. "Up by 5:30 to make Emma's lunch and check her homework from the night before. Breakfast by 6:15, she's going through a phase where she'll only eat scrambled eggs with exactly 3 cherry tomatoes and toast cut into triangles, not rectangles. School drop-off by 7:30, then a full day here." He glanced at the silver watch on his wrist, a habit Elizabeth had noticed he repeated throughout each workday, as if constantly calculating the hours until he needed to be elsewhere. After work, it's ballet on Tuesdays. Emma started when she was 5. She's not particularly talented at it, but her mother was a dancer, so. He trailed off momentarily. Science club on Wednesdays, that's new this year, and she's actually showing quite an aptitude for it. Therapy on Thursdays with Dr. Landon. We've been seeing her for almost 4 years now. And Fridays are for grocery shopping and picking up prescriptions. Elizabeth nodded slowly, beginning to understand the precision with which Michael orchestrated his life. Weekends aren't much different, he continued. Saturday mornings are for chores. Emma has a chart on the refrigerator with her responsibilities. She gets a sticker for each completed task, and when she fills the chart, we have a movie night with popcorn and candy. A small smile softened his features. Sundays are for homework, meal prep for the week, and whatever small adventure I can manage on a budget. The Children's Museum, the park, the library's story hour. Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, struck by the careful architecture of his life, built entirely around his child. That sounds comprehensive, she said, not quite sure how to respond. It's necessary, Michael replied simply. There was something in his tone that suggested more than just the logistical challenges of single parenthood. Elizabeth had known several single parents throughout her career, had been raised by one herself, but Michael's dedication seemed to transcend the usual demands of the role. Michael, she began again, her voice softer now, I'm not trying to be insensitive, but many single parents manage to date. Is there something more to it? Michael was silent for so long that Elizabeth began to regret her question. She was about to apologize and end the meeting when he spoke again. Elizabeth, he began, rubbing his tired eyes, do you know what Emma asked me last week? Elizabeth shook her head, suddenly uncomfortable with her intrusion but unable to retreat. She asked if I remembered what her mother's voice sounded like, Michael continued, his gaze drifting to the window where late afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the office park. Because she doesn't. Not anymore. The air in the office grew heavy with the weight of his words. Caroline died when Emma was 4. Aggressive breast cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to, his voice caught. To the end. Emma spent those 6 months watching her mother disappear. First her hair, then her strength, finally her presence altogether. Elizabeth's professional demeanor cracked as the magnitude of what Michael carried daily began to register. Michael, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. It's not something I advertise, he said with a small, sad smile that didn't reach his eyes. We moved here afterward, for a fresh start. No one here knew Caroline. Sometimes that's a relief, not having to see the pity in people's eyes. Other times, it feels like I'm the only one keeping her memory alive. He reached for the glass of water on Elizabeth's desk, taking a careful sip before continuing. But that's only part of it. Michael shifted in his chair, revealing more of himself than he had to anyone at work in all his years there. Caroline and I met in college. She was a dance major, I was studying finance, complete opposites in almost every way. She used to tease me about my spreadsheets and budgeting apps. A genuine smile briefly illuminated his face. We were young when we married, 23. Everyone said we were rushing, but Caroline always said she knew her mind and her heart. His fingers traced an invisible pattern on the arm of the chair. We waited 5 years before having Emma. Wanted to be established, responsible. Caroline had just been offered a position with a regional dance company. I had started at my first serious firm. We bought a small house in the suburbs, painted a nursery yellow because Caroline didn't believe in gender-specific colors. Elizabeth noticed how Michael spoke of these memories, not with the raw grief of recent loss, but with the careful precision of someone who had catalogued each detail, preserving them like pressed flowers between the pages of a book. Emma was born in October. Perfect health, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Caroline took to motherhood like she did everything else, with complete commitment and joy. She went back to dancing part-time when Emma was 6 months old. We had this whole schedule worked out, trading off childcare and work hours. His voice grew quieter, and Elizabeth found herself leaning forward to hear him. When Emma was 3, Caroline found a lump. By the time they diagnosed it, the cancer had already spread to her lymph nodes. Stage 4. The oncologist gave us options, but not much hope. Michael paused, swallowing hard. We decided not to tell Emma how serious it was. Just that Mommy was sick and needed medicine that would make her tired and her hair fall out, but that the doctors were trying to make her better. I don't know if that was the right decision. The child psychologists have mixed opinions on how much to tell kids that young about death. Elizabeth thought of her own nieces and nephews, trying to imagine explaining terminal illness to a preschooler. I can't imagine there's a right way to handle something like that, she offered quietly. Michael nodded, grateful for the understanding. Caroline fought hard, multiple rounds of chemo, experimental treatments. We exhausted our savings, took out a second mortgage. I would have sold my soul if someone had offered to buy it. His laugh was hollow, echoing with the desperation of those days. But cancer doesn't negotiate. The office had grown darker as they talked, the automatic lights dimming with the lack of movement. Neither made a move to reset them. The last month, we had hospice care at home. Caroline insisted. She wanted to be where she could hear Emma playing in the next room. I took family leave to be with them. Emma would crawl into bed beside her mother, so careful not to jostle the 4 lines or press against her body, which had grown so thin and fragile. Michael's eyes glistened in the low light. The night before Caroline died, she made me promise 2 things, that I would make sure Emma remembered her, and that I wouldn't let grief steal my capacity for joy. Find happiness again, she told me. Just make sure it's with someone who will love Emma as much as I do. His voice broke on the last words, and Elizabeth felt her own eyes filling with tears. She died the next morning while Emma and I were making breakfast. Pancakes with blueberry eyes and a whipped cream smile. Caroline's special Saturday recipe. He drew a deep breath. We went in to show her, but she was already gone. Elizabeth reached across her desk, hesitating before placing her hand gently on Michael's arm. "I'm so sorry," she said again, the words wholly inadequate for the magnitude of his loss. After Caroline died, Emma stopped speaking. Completely. For 11 months, Michael continued, seeming to draw strength from finally sharing this burden he had carried alone for so long. The psychologist called it selective mutism triggered by trauma. We tried everything, specialists, therapy, different schools. Nothing worked until I promised her one thing. What was that? Elizabeth asked, her voice barely audible. I promised her I would never leave her. That she would always be my priority, that she would never have to compete for my attention or worry about being left behind again. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. The day after I made that promise, she asked for pancakes for breakfast. First words in almost a year. Elizabeth's hand moved unconsciously to her heart, struck by the image of a silent child finally finding words again through the security of her father's promise. So you see, Michael continued, composing himself with visible effort, dating isn't just complicated logistically. For Emma, it represents a threat to the security she's rebuilt. And for me, he paused, searching for words. For me, it's not just about finding someone I could love. It's about finding someone who understands they'd be getting both of us, with all our broken pieces and daily struggles. Someone who wouldn't mind that some nights I still sleep on Emma's floor when the nightmares come back. He straightened in his chair, as if suddenly remembering where they were and the professional relationship they were supposed to be maintaining. I apologize. That was far more personal than you asked for. No, Elizabeth said quickly. Please don't apologize. I'm the one who should apologize for prying. The confession hung in the air between them, too raw for immediate response. Elizabeth found herself reassessing everything she thought she knew about the quiet, efficient analyst who had worked under her supervision for years. "The thing is," Michael continued after gathering himself, "I'm not unhappy. That's what people don't understand. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, sometimes I'm lonely. But when Emma masters a new ballet position or brings home an A on her science project or simply has a day without that haunted look in her eyes, that's everything. That's enough." He glanced at his watch again. "I should go. Emma will be waiting." Elizabeth nodded slowly, seeing her employee, seeing this man, truly for the first time. "Of course." As Michael reached the door, she called after him. "Michael?" He turned, hand on the doorknob. "Emma starts high school in a few years. Then college. Someday, she'll build her own life. Maybe then," she said, echoing thoughts he must have had himself. A small smile touched his lips. "Maybe then," he agreed. "But for now, I'm exactly where I need to be." After he left, Elizabeth sat in her darkened office for a long time, thinking about sacrifice and love and the quiet heroism of a father rebuilding a world for his daughter from the ashes of shared grief. The following Monday morning, Elizabeth noticed a subtle shift in how she perceived Michael. Where before she had seen only a dedicated employee with excellent time management skills, she now saw a man performing a daily high-wire act with no safety net. Each time he checked his watch, she recognized it not as impatience but as the vigilance of someone who couldn't afford to slip. During the weekly team meeting, she observed how Michael participated, always prepared, always insightful, but with a certain economy of engagement. He never volunteered for projects with unpredictable hours or travel requirements, though she suspected he would excel at them. When Todd from compliance made yet another joke about Michael's rigid departure time, Turner's got a hot date with his timecard. Elizabeth found herself intervening. "Actually, Todd, Michael's time management skills are something we could all learn from. He manages to accomplish more in his workday than most of us do with overtime." Her tone was light but pointed. Todd had the grace to look embarrassed. "No offense meant, Turner. Just jealous of your 9-to-5 discipline." Michael nodded acknowledgement, but Elizabeth caught the brief look of gratitude he sent her way. After the meeting, she made a point to stop by his desk. "I hope I didn't overstep," she said quietly. "Not at all," Michael assured her. "Thank you. Sometimes it's easier to let the comments slide than explain." Elizabeth hesitated, then added, "I've adjusted the team workflow. Those after-hours client calls we've been handling, I've redistributed them. Your new assignments are all within business hours." Surprise registered on Michael's face, followed by something deeper, the relief of a drowning man thrown an unexpected lifeline. "I appreciate that more than I can express," he said simply. "It's just good management," Elizabeth replied professionally, though they both knew it was more than that. The weeks that followed changed something in their workplace dynamic. Elizabeth stopped scheduling Michael for late meetings. When planning sessions ran long, she made a point of summarizing key points for him before he needed to leave. She noticed how he redoubled his efficiency in response, often completing analyses ahead of schedule or taking on additional work that could be accomplished within his time constraints. One Tuesday afternoon, Elizabeth passed the break room and overheard a conversation between Michael and Sarah from marketing. "My nephew loved that aquarium exhibit," Sarah was saying, leaning against the counter with a posture that signaled interest beyond the professional. "They have a new octopus that changes color when you approach the glass. I'd be happy to show you and Emma around sometime. My nephew's mom gives me weekend passes since she works there." Michael was stirring his coffee with careful attention. "That's kind of you, Sarah. Emma would love that, I'm sure. But it wouldn't be a date," Sarah interjected quickly, then blushed. "I mean, unless you wanted it to be. I just thought, kids and aquariums, you know." Elizabeth paused outside the door, knowing she should walk away but curious about Michael's response. I appreciate the offer, Michael said gently. Emma does love marine biology. But I think it might send mixed signals, and I'm not in a position to, he faltered, clearly searching for words that wouldn't hurt feelings. You're not interested in dating, Sarah finished for him, her smile tight but professional. I get it. No problem. It's not that simple, Michael began. Sarah held up a hand. Really, it's fine. I shouldn't have made things awkward. We work together, after all. Elizabeth continued walking, feeling oddly protective of Michael's private struggles. Later that day, she sent him an email about a children's marine biology program at the local community college, no strings attached, just information he might find useful for Emma. His reply was prompt, "Thank you for thinking of us. Emma would love this. I've already registered her for the Saturday sessions." A small thing, Elizabeth reflected, but perhaps the beginning of understanding what support could look like without intrusion. When the company picnic approached in June, Elizabeth made significant changes to the traditional format. Rather than the usual adults-only evening affair with open bar and networking opportunities, she shifted to a family-friendly afternoon in the park with activities for employees' children. "I'm not sure I understand the change in direction," her boss, Regional Director Thomas Hargrove, commented during their planning meeting. "The annual mixer has always been an important networking opportunity. I've been reviewing our employee satisfaction metrics," Elizabeth explained. "Nearly 40% of our staff have children under 18. For many of them, particularly single parents, evening events present childcare challenges that effectively exclude them from participation." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "This wouldn't have anything to do with your recent divorce, would